After losing his fiancée in a tragic accident, Aarav, a once passionate and hopeful young man, becomes a shadow of who he used to be. Haunted by memories, guilt, and the weight of everything he couldn't save, he withdraws from life, convinced that love is something he no longer deserves. To escape the noise of his own grief, he returns to his quiet childhood town, a place filled with silence, unhealed wounds, and a past he never fully faced. There, by fate or chance, he meets Anaya, a gentle, warm-hearted schoolteacher carrying her own invisible scars. She understands pain in a way few can, because she too has lost someone she loved deeply. Two broken souls, two unfinished stories, two people who don't believe they deserve happiness anymore. And yet, in each other, they find small pieces of what they've lost. Aarav finds hope again. Anaya finds forgiveness for herself. As their quiet connection deepens, Aarav battles a painful question. If I allow myself to love again, am I betraying the one I lost? And Anaya faces her own fear. Can I love someone whose heart still belongs to another? Their journey becomes an emotional exploration of grief, healing, and the courage to choose life again. A story of love, loss, healing, and the strength to begin again. Because, in the end, the heart always remembers what teaches it to live again. The rain had a strange way of falling that night, not in soft sheets or sharp needles, but in heavy, uneven drops, as if the sky itself was struggling to breathe. Aarav Mehta tightened his grip on the steering wheel, blinking away the blur on the windshield. The wipers struggled to keep up. Water hammered the glass, turning the world outside into a shifting watercolor of darkness and headlights. Aside him, Mira laughed softly, not the carefree laugh she was famous for, but something gentler, tender, the kind of laugh people fall in love with. "Slow down, Aarav," she said, nudging his arm playfully. "You keep driving like this, and my heart will jump out before the car does." Aarav smirked, though his jaw was tense. "You're the one who insisted on going out tonight." "I didn't think the weather would turn into the apocalypse." Mira pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her big, expressive eyes reflecting the bright streetlights. "Also, I wanted to see the city lights with you. It's our last week before the wedding. We deserve one night." Aarav's heart softened the way it always did around her. She wasn't just the woman he loved, she was the part of him that still believed life could be beautiful. He reached over, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "You look scared." "I am, but I wasn't talking about the weather." Aarav frowned slightly. "Then what?" Mira exhaled, her breath fogging the glass. "Everything is changing so fast. It feels like we blinked and suddenly we're adults, making promises, planning lives. What if we're rushing?" He let out a soft laugh. "You're marrying me, Mira, not climbing Mount Everest." "That's what I'm afraid of," she teased, leaning into him. The car skidded slightly. Aarav's hand jerked the wheel. "See?" she said. "Everest might actually be safer than you're driving." He chuckled, but the road ahead grew slicker, the curves sharper. His heartbeat quickened as the tires hissed on the wet asphalt. Then Mira's voice softened, fading into something fragile. "Aarav, promise me something." "Anything." Her fingers found his, warm and small. "Don't let life dim this version of you. Even if I'm not there someday, promise me you'll keep living brightly." He shot her a confused look. "What kind of promise is that? You're always going to be there." She smiled, but it wasn't her usual smile. It was almost sad, almost knowing. "Just promise me." Aarav squeezed her hand. "I promise." Those were the last words spoken before the world changed. A truck, its headlights a blinding pair of white suns, swerved out of nowhere, skidding sideways across the road. Aarav yelled, wrenching the steering wheel as the car veered off the asphalt. Rain, Screeching tires, metal twisting, glass shattering, a scream. He didn't know if it was hers or his. And then, silence. Aarav's ears rang with an eerie emptiness. Smoke curled through the broken dashboard. His vision flickered in and out. Mira, his voice cracked. She was slumped against the shattered window, her hair sticky with blood, her breath too faint, too quiet. Mira, he choked, reaching for her face with trembling fingers. Her eyes opened, barely. She looked at him like she was trying to memorize him one last time. Aarav, she whispered. No, 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 stay with me. Help is coming. Just stay. He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing shakily. You promised you'd never leave me. Mira, please. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Live brightly. Remember? Then her hand slipped from his. Her head went still, her chest fell one last time, and the world ended. Rain continued falling, but Aarav didn't hear it. The sirens in the distance didn't register. Nothing existed except the unbearable weight in his arms. He held her, rocking back and forth, sobbing into her hair. His tears mixed with the rain, washing down her skin as if the sky itself was grieving with him. The medics pulled him away, shouting something, but Aarav didn't understand, didn't want to understand. In that moment, he knew one thing with devastating clarity. He would never be the same man again. The next morning, newspapers would call it a tragic accident. Doctors would call it an irreversible loss. Neighbors would call it God's will. But Aarav knew the truth. It was more than an accident, more than a tragedy, more than fate. It was the night love died inside him. The night he made a promise he no longer knew how to keep. And yet, somewhere, beneath the grief, beneath the crushing silence of his empty chest, beneath the ashes of everything he had been, the heart still remembered her words, even if he wished it didn't. Classrooms, cafeterias, office corridors, none of them are as painfully silent as the inside of a house where someone once laughed. Aarav didn't realize this until he entered his apartment again. The door creaked open, the light flicked on, and everything looked exactly the same, yet unbearably different. Mira's scarf still lay on the couch where she tossed it last week. Her perfume lingered faintly in the air, like a ghost refusing to leave. The mug she used every morning still sat near the sink, half-washed because she always got distracted mid-work. Aarav's heart stuttered. He wasn't ready for this. Not for the memories, not for the silence, not for the echo of her absence in every corner. He couldn't breathe. The walls felt too close. He dropped onto the couch, holding his head in his hands. His fingers shook violently, and for a moment he thought he was having a heart attack. But it wasn't his heart. It was grief. Grief has a way of making the body forget what breathing feels like. Aarav squeezed his eyes shut. She's gone. 2 words, so small, yet they tore through him like lightning. His phone buzzed. He looked at it reluctantly. His sister Ria had texted, "Aaru, please pick up. I'm coming over." He ignored it. A minute later, another text. "You don't have to talk. Just open the door when I knock." He didn't answer that either. He didn't want comfort. He didn't want company. He wanted the impossible. To rewind time, to change fate, to pull Mira out of death's arms and place her safely back into his. He stood up and walked mechanically toward the bedroom. Her clothes hung neatly in the wardrobe. Her favorite yellow dress peeped from behind the others. Her earrings sat in their tiny box, arranged exactly how she liked. Her diary was on the nightstand. Aarav's breath hitched. He shouldn't open it. He knew he shouldn't. But grief is a strange creature. It pushes you toward pain just to feel closer to the one you lost. His trembling fingers opened the diary. On the first page, in Mira's round, cheerful handwriting, it read, "To my future self. I hope you're still smiling when you read this." A sob tore out of him before he could stop it. He clutched the diary to his chest, shaking violently. Why? Why did you leave? His voice cracked, barely audible. He slid down to the floor, back pressed against the bed, crying until his throat burned. Time blurred. Minutes or hours passed. He couldn't tell. There was a soft knock on the door. He didn't move. "Aaru, it's me," Ria called gently. Another knock, then another. Finally, with heavy legs and a heavier heart, he walked to the door and opened it. Ria stepped in without a word. Her eyes were swollen. She had been crying too. When she saw his face, she broke. "Oh, Aaru," she whispered, pulling him into a tight embrace. At first, Aarav stood stiff, but something inside him cracked, and he leaned into her, sobbing against her shoulder. She didn't try to soothe him, didn't give empty reassurances, didn't say, "It'll be okay." She just held him, and sometimes that's only the kind of comfort grief allows. Ria made tea, because doing something normal felt safer than drowning in sadness. She placed a cup in front of Aarav. He didn't touch it. "You haven't eaten," she said softly. Aarav stared into space. Ria sat beside him. "Aaru, talk to me, please." He shook his head. Words felt foreign, like he had forgotten how to speak. Ria hesitated. "The doctors said—" "Don't," Aarav said holily. "Please don't say her name. Not yet." Ria nodded and took his hand. It felt cold, almost lifeless. They sat in silence for a long time. After a while, she said quietly, "You're blaming yourself." Aarav closed his eyes. Ria continued, "It wasn't your fault. You didn't cause the accident." He let out a bitter laugh. "Then why does it feel like I killed her?" Ria's eyes filled again. "Aaru." "I was driving," he whispered. "I should have seen the truck sooner. I should have slowed down. I should have—" "No," she said firmly. "It was raining. Visibility was terrible. The truck skidded into your lane. It wasn't your fault." "But I promised her," Aarav said, breaking. "I promised I'd keep her safe." Ria reached out and cupped his face. "Aarav, some things are not in our control." Aarav looked away. He didn't believe that. He didn't want to. Guilt was easier to hold than acceptance, because guilt meant that he could have done something. Acceptance meant he was helpless, and Aarav didn't know how to forgive helplessness. Later that night, after Ria left, Aarav walked to Mira's desk. Her sketchbook lay half open. There was a drawing of him inside, half finished, like her life. He traced the pencil lines gently. "I don't know how to live without you," he whispered. The room was silent. Then something caught his eye. A small envelope tucked beneath the sketchbook. His name written in Mira's handwriting. Aarav froze. His heart thudded painfully. He lifted the envelope with trembling hands. The edges were slightly worn. She must have written it days ago. Was it a love letter? A surprise? A message for after the wedding? Or— Aarav's throat tightened. He wasn't ready. He placed the envelope back down, stepping away as if it could burn him. Not today. He couldn't handle more pain today. He turned off the lights and sat by the window instead, staring at the city lights outside. They looked dull, faint, lifeless, just like him. Mira once said city lights reminded her of possibilities. Now, to Aarav, they looked like 1,000 distant stars, each one too far to reach. He rested his head against the glass, closed his eyes, and whispered into the darkness, "Come back, even for a moment, please." But only silence answered him, and the realization hit him again, sharper than the first time. Mira wasn't coming back. Ever. He wrapped his arms around himself as if trying to hold his breaking pieces together. But grief has no mercy. It doesn't pause, doesn't soften. That night, it crushed him again and again, until he finally fell asleep, not because he found peace, but because his body could no longer endure staying awake. Mornings were supposed to bring clarity, a soft reset for the heart. But for Aarav, dawn only brought a deeper ache. He woke to the sharp slice of sunlight creeping through the curtains, landing directly on the empty half of the bed where Mira once slept. It was a cruel reminder. He turned his face away, but the light found him anyway, warm and indifferent. It didn't care that the woman he loved was gone. The world kept going. Time kept moving. People kept breathing. Only his life had stopped. Aarav sat up slowly, his body heavy, as if grief had taken physical form and settled on his shoulders. The room was too quiet. Mira used to hum while getting ready, sometimes soft, sometimes enthusiastically off-key just to annoy him. But today, nothing. Just the hollow ringing of an apartment that no longer had her voice. He rubbed his eyes and swung his legs out of the bed. His foot hit something, a pair of her sandals. He froze. His chest tightened. He crouched down, picking them up gently, almost reverently. How could such small things hurt so deeply? He held the sandals to his chest for a moment, then placed them carefully back where they belonged, because moving them felt too much like erasing her. A long breath left him, jagged at the edges. He stood and made his way to the bathroom. On the counter sat her jasmine-scented shampoo, her rose water spray, her little hair clip shaped like a butterfly. He traced a finger over it, remembering how she used to clip it into his hair just to laugh at him. "Don't move," she'd say dramatically. "My masterpiece is almost done." He squeezed his eyes shut. He couldn't stay here. Not today. He needed air, fresh air, not the recycled grief choking this home. He got dressed in clothes that felt too big on his suddenly fragile frame and stepped outside into the soft morning breeze. The city had returned to its usual rhythm. Cars honked, children laughed, and street vendors set up their stalls. The normalcy felt offensive. How could the world continue as if nothing had changed, as if Mira's absence didn't crack open the sky? Aarav walked with no direction. He didn't care where he ended up. Every street reminded him of her anyway. The cafe where she ordered too much dessert, the bookstore where she made him read poetry he didn't understand, the florist who knew her name by heart. Every corner held a piece of her. But there was one place he didn't go near, the intersection where the accident happened. He wasn't ready. He didn't know if he ever would be. After an hour of wandering, Aarav found himself standing outside Mira's old art studio, the one she rented so she could teach local kids how to paint. The sign still read, "Mira's Little Wonders." His breath caught. Through the dusty glass, he saw half-finished paintings, tiny stools and a jar of colorful brushes. Her apron hung on the wall, her name painted across it in bright blue. He placed his palm on the glass. He shouldn't have come. This place was alive with her, too alive. A movement reflected behind him. Aarav turned. It was Mrs. Deshpande, the elderly landlord of the studio. Her eyes softened when she recognized him. "Aarav, beta," she said gently. "When I saw you standing there, my heart broke all over again." He swallowed hard. "Good morning, Auntie." She approached with slow, careful steps. "I kept the studio exactly as she left it. Couldn't bring myself to change anything." Aarav nodded, unable to speak. "She loved those kids," Mrs. Deshpande continued, wiping a tear. "She always said teaching them gave her wings." Aarav smiled faintly, a shadow of a smile, but a smile nonetheless. "She gave them more than wings," he whispered. "She gave them color." The old woman squeezed his arm. "You should come in sometime. Sit. Talk to her paintings. She's still there, you know, in every brushstroke." Aarav's throat tightened. I will. Someday." "Not someday," she said softly. "Soon." She gave him one last sorrowful look and walked away, leaving Aarav alone with the memories. He stared at the studio door for a long time, but he couldn't go inside. Not yet. His heart wasn't ready to bleed that deeply. He turned and walked away. By afternoon, exhaustion settled in his bones. He returned home slowly, dragging his feet. When he opened the door, the envelope from last night caught his eye again, lying on the desk, waiting, his name on it, in her handwriting. His chest tightened. He walked toward it like a man approaching a cliff. He picked it up, held it between his fingers. A letter from the love of his life. A message she wrote when she was still breathing, still laughing, still dreaming. He sat down on the edge of the bed. His fingers slid under the flap, then froze. He couldn't do it. Reading it felt like reopening wounds he hadn't even begun to close, like letting her voice reach him from a world where he couldn't reach back, like stepping deeper into grief when he could barely survive where he already stood. He set the envelope down again. Not today. Not yet. He wasn't strong enough. Maybe he never would be. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, turning everything golden, a color Mira used to call the color of hope. Aarav sat by the window again, knees pulled to his chest. "Are you seeing this?" he whispered into the fading light. Silence answered him, but somewhere deep inside, a single thought flickered. She wanted me to live brightly. The words felt heavy and unreal, but they lingered. They waited, like a promise he wasn't ready to keep. He leaned his head against the cold window pane and closed his eyes. Outside, the sky burned with color. Inside, Aarav faded into the quiet. But even in his quietest moments, his heart kept whispering her name, softly, brokenly, endlessly. The knock on the door came at an unexpected hour. Aarav had been staring blankly out of the window for what felt like an eternity, watching the city lights flicker and blur in the evening rain. He didn't know how long he had been sitting there. Minutes, hours, or days. Time had lost its meaning. "Aaru?" The voice was soft, hesitant, carrying an unfamiliar warmth. Aarav turned. Standing in the doorway was Dr. Renuka Sharma, a therapist his sister had insisted he see. He started, but the words got caught in his throat. Dr. Renuka gave a small, understanding smile. "You don't have to explain anything. I just wanted to check if you were okay." Aarav's eyes narrowed. Who said I need to be okay? His voice was flat, brittle, defensive. She didn't flinch. She stepped inside anyway, her presence quiet but steady. She said, "I'm not here to fix you. Not yet. I'm just here, if you want." Aarav stared at her. He wanted to close the door, lock himself back into his grief, and pretend no one existed outside his pain. But something about her calm, unassuming demeanor made him pause. He let her in. She sat on the couch, not too close, not too far. Her hands rested lightly on her knees, and she looked at him, not with pity, but with a quiet curiosity that unsettled him. "Would you like some tea?" he asked automatically, the words tasting foreign in his own mouth. "No, thank you," she replied. Her gaze remained on him. "I just wanted to be here, that's all." For a long while, they didn't speak. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly. It was heavy, almost tangible. Aarav felt like he could reach out and touch it. Every breath he took seemed amplified, every heartbeat loud in his chest. Finally, she broke the quiet. "I know losing someone this way." She faltered slightly, as if the words themselves were heavy. "It's not something you just get over, and it's certainly not something you do alone." Aarav's hands curled into fists. "I don't need help. I just need time, that's all." Renuka nodded slowly. "Time can help, yes, but sometimes time alone isn't enough. You need someone to walk with you through it, even if it's just a little bit, one step at a time." Aarav laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. "Walk with me. There's nothing left to walk toward." She tilted her head, meeting his gaze. "There's always a way forward, even if you can't see it yet. Sometimes you just need to take the first step, even if it's terrifying." He didn't answer. He didn't know what to say. She wasn't offering solutions. She wasn't asking him to forgive himself. She was just present. Finally, he said nothing, leaning back against the wall. Renuka watched him for a while, then spoke again. "I'm not going to force anything. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. But if you do, I'll listen, not judge, not tell you what to feel, just listen." Her words were like a gentle knock at the door of his mind. He wanted to slam it shut, wanted to run, but he didn't. He stayed. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Outside, the rain continued to fall softly, dripping from the eaves of the building, pattering on the window. Inside, the quiet room held two people, one broken, one patient, both suspended in a fragile moment of understanding. Renuka finally rose. "I should go. I don't want to overwhelm you, but I'll be back if you want. Or not. It's entirely up to you." Aarav nodded, unsure what to do with this stranger who somehow understood the weight of his silence. She left, the soft click of the door echoing in the empty apartment. Alone again, Aarav sank to the floor. The envelope on the desk, the one from Mira, stared at him. He hadn't touched it since last night. He didn't know if he would. But for the first time since the accident, a faint, almost imperceptible thought flickered through his mind. Maybe I don't have to do this alone. He didn't know if he believed it. He didn't know if he wanted to. But it lingered. A tiny ember in the darkness. A whisper that said, perhaps, just perhaps, someone could walk with him through the pain. And for now, that was enough. The envelope sat on Aarav's desk like a silent accusation. Its corners were slightly worn, the paper fragile in his fingers, and his name was written in Mira's familiar looping handwriting. For days he had avoided it, avoided the sound of her voice in words, avoided the truth it carried, the final trace of the woman he loved. But tonight, the apartment felt colder than usual, empty even by its own standards. He could no longer pretend that avoiding her words would ease the ache in his chest. With trembling hands, he picked up the envelope and broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He unfolded it, and instantly her presence seemed to fill the room. My love, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer there with you. I hope you aren't crying, though if you are, it's okay. I would cry too, because I will miss you every day. But you must listen to me, always. Promise me you will. Aarav's hands shook. He pressed the paper to his chest as if it could make her real again. Do not let my absence define you. I want you to live, truly live. Paint, draw, dream, love, laugh. Take chances even when you're afraid. Live brightly, Aarav, even if I am not there to see it. He sank to the floor, the letter trembling in his hands. Her words were a lifeline thrown across the void, and yet they felt like a knife. I know you will feel lost. I know the nights will be long and lonely. I know the world will sometimes seem unbearably cruel. But I need you to promise me that you will find your way through it, that you will find joy again, and maybe, just maybe, you will find love again in ways that don't replace me, but honor what we had. Aarav's chest constricted. A sob escaped him, loud and raw, shaking the apartment walls. Remember, my love, I never wanted to hold you back. I wanted to lift you higher. So take every color I left behind in your life and make something beautiful of it. Even if I am not there to see it, I will be with you in every brushstroke, every laugh, every heartbeat. He couldn't breathe. The words blurred. Tears ran freely down his face, dripping onto the paper. It smelled faintly of her perfume. It smelled of life, and loss, and hope. Aarav buried his face in his hands. I can't do this. I can't live without you. And yet, you want me to live anyway? The letter felt heavy with both sorrow and a strange kind of lightness. It demanded he grieve, yet it demanded he move forward. It was cruel and merciful. He read it again and again, every word a pulse in his chest, every sentence a thread connecting him to a life he feared he could never touch again. Then slowly, almost painfully, a spark ignited. Maybe I can live. Not today, not fully, not completely, but maybe someday. He placed the letter on the desk carefully, like a sacred relic, something to return to when the nights felt unbearable, something to remind him that she still believed in him, even when he did not. For the first time since the accident, he felt the faintest stirring of determination. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was a seed, small, fragile, but alive. Aarav closed his eyes, letting the silence wrap around him, and in that silence, Mira's voice seemed to whisper once more. Live brightly, my love. Live brightly. He didn't move from the floor for hours, but when he finally stood, he felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but less broken. Somewhere in the depths of grief, a door had opened, a door to a life that still existed, a life he had a chance to reclaim. He would walk through it one day. He would honor her memory, not by staying in the dark, but by painting, by creating, by living. And perhaps, when the time was right, he could allow someone else into his heart. But for now, he would start with himself. The train rolled steadily through the countryside, cutting across endless fields that glowed golden in the afternoon sun. Aarav sat by the window, hands folded on his lap, watching the world blur past. He had not been back to his childhood town in over 10 years. It had been a place of comfort once, a place of laughter, mischief, and endless summer evenings. Now it felt like a sanctuary, a refuge from the suffocating memories of the city, the accident, and the hollow apartment he could no longer bear. The rhythmic clatter of the train against the tracks was hypnotic. It matched the steady thump of his heart, a pulse that was slowly, painfully beginning to feel again. The station was smaller than he remembered. A single platform, a handful of shops, a sign peeling at the edges. The air smelled of wet earth and dust, the scent of rain lingering from earlier showers. Aarav stepped onto the platform and drew in a deep breath. It smelled like home, and yet it smelled different. He realized that a part of him had been living in a fog for years, so he hadn't really remembered it clearly. The streets were quiet, lined with familiar old houses, each one holding fragments of his childhood. The bakery where he and Ria would sneak sweets, the park where he learned to ride his bicycle, the banyan tree where he and his friends had carved their names decades ago. Every sight was a memory, every smell a ghost of the boy he used to be. He finally arrived at his parents' old house. It was smaller than he remembered. The paint had faded, the gate creaked, and the garden was overgrown. Yet to him it was perfect. The door opened before he could knock. His mother stood there, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes filled with relief and sorrow at once. "Aaru," she whispered, her voice trembling. Before he could speak, she enveloped him in a tight hug. He allowed himself to lean into her warmth, the familiar scent of jasmine and home washing over him. I didn't know if I could," she said softly. "You needed to come. Sometimes you must return to where you belong to find yourself again." The house was simple, filled with familiar items that felt like anchors. His old bedroom had been left almost untouched, a few childhood trophies, a faded poster of a cricket team, and his old diary tucked in the corner. Everything reminded him of simpler days, before tragedy, before grief consumed him. That night, Aarav walked through the small town. The streets were bathed in golden light from the setting sun. Children played cricket in the narrow lanes, their laughter echoing like music. He paused near the riverbank on the outskirts of town. He first saw Anaya. She was sitting on a wooden bench, a book in her lap, sunlight catching strands of her hair in a golden halo. Aarav froze. There was something about her, something gentle yet commanding. Her presence was calm, grounded yet mysterious. She noticed him watching and gave a small, polite smile. Aarav felt his chest tighten. He didn't know why, but he felt lighter somehow. He nodded awkwardly. "Hi," he managed. "Hi," she replied, her voice soft but steady. There was a pause, a fragile, tentative moment where nothing happened, and yet everything shifted. Aarav realized that a part of him had been living in a fog for years, so he hadn't really remembered it clearly. That evening, he sat by the river watching the sunset bleed orange and gold across the water. Mira's letter lay in his pocket. He felt her presence in the colors, in the breeze, in the quiet flow of the river. Somewhere deep in his heart, he knew. The journey ahead would be long, painful, and uncertain. But for the first time, he also knew maybe he could still find moments of happiness. Maybe he could still learn to breathe again. And perhaps, maybe he wasn't entirely alone anymore. The river flowed quietly, reflecting the last light of the setting sun, rippling gold and amber across its surface. Aarav sat on the wooden bench, hands clasped together, staring at the water. He could feel the weight of the city, the accident, the grief, slowly slipping from him. Or at least he hoped it was. The soft rustle of footsteps drew his attention. A woman was approaching, balancing a bundle of papers in her arms. Her hair was loosely tied back, sunlight catching the strands like threads of fire. Aarav felt a jolt in his chest, an unfamiliar, unsettling feeling. He quickly looked away, pretending not to notice. But she stopped nearby, smiling politely. "Excuse me, do you know where the Old Town Library is? I'm looking for some children's books." Her voice was gentle, warm, and carried a calm certainty that made Aarav's chest tighten again. I think it's a few streets down that way," he said, pointing vaguely toward the town center. She nodded. "Thank you." Her eyes lingered on him briefly, curious, friendly, and then she started walking again, carefully balancing her papers. Aarav watched her go, feeling a strange pull he didn't understand. The next morning, Aarav returned to the river, hoping for some solitude, but there she was again. Anaya was sitting cross-legged on the grass, drawing in a sketchbook. Aarav's curiosity got the better of him. "Hi," he said cautiously. She looked up and smiled. "Hi. I, I didn't expect to see anyone here," he said, his voice stiff. "Neither did I," she replied lightly. "But this is peaceful, isn't it? Perfect for drawing or thinking, or just existing without pretending to be okay." Aarav swallowed hard. How did she know that? "I'm Aarav," he said finally, extending his hand. "Anaya," she replied, shaking it gently. There was an ease in the handshake, a simple human connection that felt like a small lifeline. For the first time in months, Aarav felt a faint smile touch his lips. Not a full smile, not yet, but enough to remind him that life was still possible, even after tragedy. As the days turned into weeks, Aarav and Anaya's interactions remained small, but meaningful. A shared bench by the river, a quiet conversation about books or sketches, a fleeting smile exchanged across the marketplace. No one pushed the other, no one demanded more, and yet a bond was forming, slowly, gently, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Aarav didn't know if it was love, he didn't know if it was hope, but he knew one thing: her presence mattered. And that, he realized, was terrifying, because he still carried Mira in his heart. And yet, for the first time since the accident, he felt that maybe, just maybe, he could survive someone else noticing him. The morning air carried a faint sweetness from the nearby gardens, and Aarav found himself walking along the familiar paths of his hometown without realizing it. He had started taking these walks daily, letting the rhythm of his steps anchor him in a world that once felt suffocating. And more often than not, he found himself near the riverbank. Anaya was there again, sitting on the grass, her sketchbook open and a pencil in her hand. "You're becoming predictable," she said, without looking up, her tone teasing but kind. Aarav hesitated. "Am I?" "Yes," she said, smiling faintly. "I notice patterns. People reveal themselves in the smallest ways." He chuckled, the sound rusty but genuine. "I guess I don't mind being predictable to you." For a moment, her eyes met his, and in that instant, Aarav felt something shift in him. A subtle warmth where there had once only been emptiness. They talked for hours that day, Not about grief, not about the past, but about small, everyday things. The rhythm of the river, the patterns in the clouds, the shapes of old houses, and the books they loved. Aarav was surprised by how easy it felt. For the first time in months, he laughed. A quiet, unguarded laugh that made his chest feel lighter. Anaya's eyes crinkled in response, and she laughed with him. It was a sound that seemed to echo in the empty spaces of his heart, filling them slowly, gently, with something he hadn't realized he had missed. Connection. Days turned into weeks, and their meetings became routine. Sometimes she would bring her sketches, and he would talk about his childhood memories. Sometimes he would read her favorite passages from the books she loved, and she would listen, eyes bright, smiling softly. Aarav realized he was beginning to feel something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. Not the fragile, fleeting kind that shatters with the slightest misstep, but a quiet, persistent warmth that lived in small moments, like the sun breaking through clouds after a storm. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Anaya closed her sketchbook and turned to him. "You're different now," she said softly. He blinked. "Different?" "Yes," she replied, a gentle certainty in her voice. "When I first met you, I saw someone carrying a lot of pain. But now, I see cracks of light. You're starting to let some of it in." Aarav's chest tightened. It was a strange sensation. He wanted to laugh, to deny it, but also to believe her. How can you see that?" he asked quietly. "I've learned to notice small things. The way you smile when you talk about memories. The way your shoulders relax when you laugh. You're letting yourself breathe again. Slowly, but you're trying." Her words lingered, soft and gentle, like a balm on old wounds. For the first time, Aarav realized that maybe he didn't have to carry everything alone. That night, he walked home slowly, the river reflecting the fading light. He thought about Mira, about her letter, and about the promise he had made to live brightly. And he thought about Anaya, her quiet strength, her warmth, and the way she seemed to see him without judgment. He wasn't ready to replace the love he had lost. He wasn't ready to erase his grief. But for the first time, he wondered, could I allow myself to feel something new without betraying the past? He realized the answer wasn't simple. It was messy, painful, and confusing. But it was also possible. For the first time in months, Aarav allowed himself a small, fragile hope that the cracks of light she saw weren't illusions, that maybe, just maybe, life could still be beautiful again. And with that thought, he finally let himself breathe, deeply, fully, and for the first time in a long while, freely. The rain came softly that evening, not the harsh, angry sheets of the night Aarav had lost Mira, but a gentle drizzle that made the world smell of earth and wet leaves. He found himself walking to the riverbank again, drawn to its quiet familiarity, to the calm it offered. And there she was, Anaya, sitting on the grass with her sketchbook. Her hair was damp, sticking slightly to her forehead, and a few strands clung to her neck. She looked up as he approached and smiled. "You came out despite the rain," she said, her voice warm, teasing. I wanted to," Aarav admitted, pulling his jacket tighter around him. It's calming here." She nodded, patting the grass beside her. "Sit." He hesitated, then lowered himself onto the damp ground. The closeness felt strange, intimate, yet comforting. They sat in silence for a long while, listening to the rain, feeling the river's gentle current in the distance, sharing the quiet without words. Finally, Anaya spoke, almost as if testing the waters. "Do you ever feel guilty for still being alive?" Aarav's heart tightened. He had felt that every day since Mira's death. He turned to look at her, surprised by the sudden intimacy of her question. Yes, he admitted, his voice low. Every single day. Sometimes I feel like I shouldn't move forward, like loving life again is somehow betraying her memory. Anaya nodded slowly, her eyes soft, empathetic. I know what you mean, she said. I lost someone too, not like you, not like her, but someone who mattered so much. I would carry this weight with me, thinking I didn't deserve to be happy again. Aarav was silent, surprised. He had expected to be the only one carrying pain in this story. Her openness startled him, but it also felt relieving. How did you... He asked softly. I didn't stop feeling the pain, she said. I just allowed myself small moments of joy, tiny things, a cup of tea, a walk in the rain, watching kids play, anything that reminded me life still exists, even if the person I loved doesn't. Her words hit me like a gentle wave. He realized he had been holding himself hostage in grief, thinking that moving forward would be disloyal. But maybe, just maybe, moving forward didn't mean forgetting. The rain eased and the sun broke through the clouds, casting soft golden light across the river. Aarav turned to Anaya, searching her face. He said, "Thank you," almost whispering, for being here, for listening. I didn't know I needed this." She smiled, a small, warm curve of her lips. "You didn't have to know," she replied. "Sometimes people just need someone who doesn't judge the cracks in their heart." Aarav let out a long breath, feeling the tension in his chest ease slightly. He realized that for the first time since Mira's death, he had shared a piece of himself without fear. It wasn't the full weight of his grief. He wasn't ready for that yet, but it was a start, and it was enough. They sat together until the evening deepened into night, talking about smaller things, laughing softly at shared memories of their childhoods, and even making gentle jokes about their clumsy attempts at drawing. Aarav noticed something strange. His heart felt lighter. Not because the grief was gone, it wasn't, but because he had allowed someone to see the raw, unguarded part of him, and they hadn't recoiled. They had understood. And that was powerful. As they stood to leave, Anaya glanced at him, her eyes reflecting the golden glow of the street lamps. "You'll be okay," she said softly. Aarav smiled faintly, the first real smile in weeks. "I think maybe I will be." And for the first time in a long while, he believed it. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wet soil and blossoming flowers. Aarav walked through the town slowly, noticing the small details he had once overlooked. The way sunlight danced on puddles, the cheerful chatter of children chasing a stray ball, the subtle warmth of the bakery's morning aroma. Life, he realized, was still moving forward, and maybe so could he. He found Anaya near the riverbank again, her sketchbook open and pencil in hand. "Morning," she said, glancing up. Her hair fell across her face in a golden cascade, and Aarav felt a pang of recognition. This simple, mundane moment felt profound. "Morning," he replied, smiling faintly. She tilted her head. "Did you sleep well?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Better than I have in a long time." She smiled softly, sensing there was more beneath the surface he wasn't saying. "You know," she said, "sometimes healing isn't about grand gestures. It's about noticing the small moments, the little sparks that remind you life is still alive." Aarav listened, feeling the truth in her words. They walked together in silence for a while, letting the river guide them. Occasionally, Anaya would point out a bird perched on a branch or a ripple in the water that looked like a painting. Aarav found himself smiling without thinking, feeling the tension in his chest ease slightly with each shared observation. Then she stopped and turned toward him. "I want to show you something," she said, her eyes twinkling. Curious, he followed her to a small wooden dock that jutted into the river. She knelt, brushing away leaves to reveal a cluster of wildflowers she had found along the path this morning. "I thought they could use a little home." Aarav's throat tightened. The gesture was small, insignificant to anyone else, but to him it was monumental. It was a reminder that life still held beauty, still held care, still held moments that mattered. "Thank you," he said quietly. It's perfect." She smiled, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "You don't need to thank me. It's just little moments." Aarav nodded, feeling a spark of warmth he hadn't felt in months. Over the next few days, their connection deepened through these small gestures. Anaya bringing him tea when he walked to the river too early, Aarav pointing out the rare birds that perched along the banks, quiet moments of laughter over a shared book, mutual teasing over failed sketches, both of them laughing until their stomachs ached. It was subtle, slow, and patient, the kind of intimacy that grew not from passion, but from trust and understanding. Aarav began to notice the changes in himself. He wasn't completely healed. The memories of Mira still haunted him. Her absence still tore at his heart like an open wound, but for the first time, he felt capable of living alongside the grief, rather than being crushed by it. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the river with gold, Anaya handed him a folded piece of paper. "I sketched this for you," she said softly. "Don't laugh." He unfolded it. It was a sketch of him, sitting on the riverbank, looking pensive but peaceful, surrounded by wildflowers, his new world rendered in soft pencil strokes. He felt a lump rise in his throat. I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice thick. "Say nothing," she said gently. "Just feel it." And he did. He felt the care in every line, the quiet affection behind the sketch, the patience of someone who had seen his cracks and chosen to stay anyway. That night, Aarav returned home with the sketch tucked carefully in his jacket pocket. He placed it on his desk, next to Mira's letter, and looked at both, the past and the present, grief and hope, loss and new beginnings. For the first time, he allowed himself to accept that it was possible to carry both love and loss, to honor Mira while still opening his heart to life again. The weight of guilt that had pressed on him for months felt lighter. Not gone, but lighter, and that was enough for now. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wet soil and blossoming flowers. Aarav walked through the town slowly, noticing the small details he had once overlooked, the way sunlight danced on puddles, the cheerful chatter of children chasing a stray ball, the subtle warmth of the bakery's morning aroma. Life, he realized, was still moving forward, and maybe so could he. He found Anaya near the riverbank again, her sketchbook open and pencil in hand. "Morning," she said, glancing up. Her hair fell across her face in a golden cascade, and Aarav felt a pang of recognition. This simple, mundane moment felt profound. "Morning," he replied, smiling faintly. She tilted her head. "Did you sleep well?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Better than I have in a long time." She smiled softly, sensing there was more beneath the surface he wasn't saying. "You know," she said, "sometimes healing isn't about grand gestures. It's about noticing the small moments, the little sparks that remind you life is still alive." Aarav listened, feeling the truth in her words. They walked together in silence for a while, letting the river guide them. Occasionally, Anaya would point out a bird perched on a branch or a ripple in the water that looked like a painting. Aarav found himself smiling without thinking, feeling the tension in his chest ease slightly with each shared observation. Then she stopped and turned toward him. "I want to show you something," she said, her eyes twinkling. Curious, he followed her to a small wooden dock that jutted into the river. She knelt, brushing away leaves to reveal a cluster of wildflowers she had found along the path this morning. "I thought they could use a little home." Aarav's throat tightened. The gesture was small, insignificant to anyone else, but to him it was monumental. It was a reminder that life still held beauty, still held care, still held moments that mattered. "Thank you," he said quietly. It's perfect." She smiled, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "You don't need to thank me. It's just little moments." Aarav nodded, feeling a spark of warmth he hadn't felt in months. Over the next few days, their connection deepened through these small gestures. Anaya bringing him tea when he walked to the river too early, Aarav pointing out the rare birds that perched along the banks, quiet moments of laughter over a shared book, mutual teasing over failed sketches, both of them laughing until their stomachs ached. It was subtle, slow, and patient, the kind of intimacy that grew not from passion, but from trust and understanding. Aarav began to notice the changes in himself. He wasn't completely healed. The memories of Mira still haunted him. Her absence still tore at his heart like an open wound, but for the first time, he felt capable of living alongside the grief, rather than being crushed by it. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the river with gold, Anaya handed him a folded piece of paper. "I sketched this for you," she said softly. "Don't laugh." He unfolded it. It was a sketch of him, sitting on the riverbank, looking pensive but peaceful, surrounded by wildflowers, his new world rendered in soft pencil strokes. He felt a lump rise in his throat. I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice thick. "Say nothing," she said gently. "Just feel it." And he did. He felt the care in every line, the quiet affection behind the sketch, the patience of someone who had seen his cracks and chosen to stay anyway. That night, Aarav returned home with the sketch tucked carefully in his jacket pocket. He placed it on his desk, next to Mira's letter, and looked at both, the past and the present, grief and hope, loss and new beginnings. For the first time, he allowed himself to accept that it was possible to carry both love and loss, to honor Mira while still opening his heart to life again. The weight of guilt that had pressed on him for months felt lighter. Not gone, but lighter, and that was enough for now. The early morning mist hovered over the riverbank, wrapping the town in a soft gray hush. Aarav walked slowly, sketchbook under his arm, replaying the previous evening in his mind. Anaya's laughter, the warmth of her hand, the ease of their shared silence. And yet, beneath the calm, a subtle ache tugged at his chest. Mira. Her memory was never far, always hovering, reminding him of love lost. He had promised her, promised himself, that he would live brightly, and he was trying. But loving life again, and perhaps feeling something for Anaya, felt like walking on a knife's edge. He reached the riverbank and sat down on the familiar wooden dock, sketching the rippling water absent-mindedly. The river was calm, but inside him, emotions swirled like the currents beneath the surface. He thought of Mira's letter. Her words echoed softly. "Do not let my absence define you. Live brightly, Aarav. even if I am not there to see it. He remembered the tears that had blurred the ink that day, the grief that had nearly crushed him, and now a different emotion stirred: guilt. How can I feel for someone else? Is it betrayal? The weight of it pressed on him, heavy and suffocating. A soft voice broke through his thoughts. "You're here early," Anaya said, appearing at the edge of the dock. Her eyes softened when they met his. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. She sat beside him, silence stretched between them, comfortable yet charged. "You're thinking about her, aren't you?" she asked gently, nodding toward the sketchbook. Aarav's throat tightened. "I can't stop." "I know," she said quietly. "I'm not trying to replace her. I know that's impossible." Her words pierced something deep inside him. She understood, not as a rival, but as someone who saw the delicate, fractured pieces of his heart and refused to judge them. I I don't know if I can allow myself to feel something new without forgetting her." Anaya reached out, her hand brushing lightly against his. "You won't forget her," she said softly. "You'll never will. She'll always be a part of you. But you're allowed to let new light in, to feel again. And it doesn't take away what you had, it honors it." Aarav looked at her, searching her face, seeing nothing but sincerity and understanding. And for the first time, he allowed himself to believe it. They sat together, the river flowing beside them, the world quiet, except for the occasional ripple and bird call. Aarav felt a small spark of clarity. Grief and love were not enemies. They could coexist. He could carry Mira in his heart while letting Anaya bring warmth and light across the river, ruffling their hair. Anaya smiled, watching him. "You're learning," she said, almost to herself. Aarav nodded. "Yes, I think I am. Slowly, but I am." Her hand found his again, lingering a fraction longer than before. No words were needed. The touch spoke of trust, understanding, and quiet affection. That night, Aarav returned to his parents' house with a sense of fragile hope. He placed Mira's letter, her sketch, and Anaya's playful shadow sketch side by side on his desk. 3 pieces of his heart, each telling a story of love, loss, and the courage to move forward. He realized he could hold all of it: Mira's memory, his grief, his emerging feelings for Anaya. All of it, intertwined like threads in a tapestry. And for the first time in months, he felt whole in a way he hadn't dared to feel before, because he understood the truth that had been whispering to him. Life could be tender and joyful again. Love could be painful and healing at the same time, and his heart was capable of both. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled light on the riverbank. Aarav walked slowly, sketchbook tucked under his arm, feeling the gentle pull of anticipation in his chest. Anaya was already there, sitting cross-legged on the grass, her sketchbook balanced on her knees. She looked up as he approached and smiled, a small warmth in her eyes that made his chest tighten. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," he replied, pausing to catch his breath. "Mind if I join you?" "Not at all," she said, patting the grass beside her. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the river flow. The gentle ripples mirrored the quiet rhythms of their thoughts, the unspoken emotions lingering between them. Aarav hesitated, then spoke. Can I tell you something?" Anaya tilted her head, curious. "Of course." He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of vulnerability settle on his shoulders. Sometimes I still talk to her," he admitted quietly. "Mira. I write to her in my journal, even though she's gone. I know it's strange." Anaya didn't flinch. Instead, she reached over, placing her hand over his. "Not strange," she said softly. It's human. It's love. You're honoring her, not betraying her." Aarav blinked, surprised by her understanding. You really think so?" "I do," she said, squeezing his hand gently. "Grief doesn't mean you have to shut yourself off from life. You can carry her memory and still let yourself feel again." For the first time, Aarav felt truly seen, not just for the pieces of him that were whole, but for the broken parts he had hidden from the world. "I've been so afraid," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid that moving forward would mean forgetting her. Afraid that feeling something for someone else would be wrong." Anaya shook her head, her gaze steady. "Feeling something new doesn't erase the past. It just means your heart is still alive. And that's not wrong. That's brave." He exhaled slowly, feeling the tension ease. Her words were a lifeline, a balm for the scars that ran deep. She smiled, her eyes crinkled at the corners. "You know," she said, a hint of mischief in her tone, "I've been keeping a secret too." Aarav looked at her, intrigued. "Oh, and what might that be?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a treasure. "I've been drawing you, secretly, when you're not looking, sketching your moments of calm, your laughter, even your awkward attempts at making shadow animals." Arav's chest tightened. He felt exposed yet honored. You've been watching me?" "Not in a creepy way," she said quickly, laughing softly. I like seeing the real you, the parts you don't show everyone." He swallowed, overwhelmed by the trust and affection in her words. I'm glad," he admitted, his voice thick. "It means I'm not alone, even when I feel broken." She reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind his ear. "You're never alone," she said softly. "Not while I'm around." They sat together for hours, sharing secrets, laughter, and small, tender touches. The river whispered beside them, the world beyond the trees fading into a soft haze. For the first time, Aarav felt the fragile joy of being truly understood. Not whole, not completely healed, but seen, accepted, loved. And in that moment, he realized that this connection, was the light he had been waiting for. A light that could coexist with his grief, that could gently guide him toward healing without erasing the past. That night, Aarav returned home with his heart lighter than it had been in months. He placed his journal next to Mira's letter and Anaya's sketches, 3 pieces of his heart now intertwined. Love lost, love remembered, and love beginning anew. And as he sat by the window, listening to the soft rustle of leaves outside, he whispered quietly into the night, Maybe it's okay to let the light in." The town was quiet that morning, the sun spilling soft golden light across the streets. Aarav walked slowly, sketchbook tucked under his arm, his thoughts heavier than the weight of the paper. For weeks, he had felt the warmth of Anaya's presence, the subtle joy of her laughter, the safety of her trust. And yet, Mira. Her memory lingered like an unhealed wound, a shadow that refused to fade. He had promised her he would live brightly, but how could he allow his heart to beat for someone else while she was gone? The riverbank felt like a mirror of his turmoil, calm on the surface, swirling currents beneath. He found Anaya already there, sitting on the dock with her sketchbook in her lap, the sun glinting in her hair. "Morning," she said, smiling, though she noticed the tension in his shoulders. "Morning," he replied, softly, lowering himself beside her. They sat in silence, watching the river, the gentle breeze carrying the scent of wet grass and flowers. Finally, Aarav spoke, his voice hesitant, fragile. "Anaya, She looked at him, waiting, patient. I don't know how to feel. I love, I mean, I care about you, but I still love her. His voice faltered, breaking. I still miss her every day. Anaya reached out, her hand covering his. I know, she said gently. You don't have to choose. Love isn't a zero-sum game. Feeling for me doesn't erase her. It doesn't betray her. It just means your heart is capable of feeling again. He looked into her eyes, searching for reassurance, and found none, only understanding, warmth, and acceptance. Can it really? He asked softly. Can I really feel for someone else without feeling guilty? Yes, she said firmly. Grief and love can coexist. You carry her memory in your heart, and that memory doesn't stop you from living. It enriches you. And maybe your love for someone else honors her, because it shows that life continues, that her presence shaped who you are, and that you are still capable of feeling. Aarav exhaled slowly, letting her words sink in. The tightness in his chest loosened slightly. He realized that he had been punishing himself for surviving, for still having a heartbeat after the tragedy. I want to believe that, he whispered quietly. Anaya smiled softly. Then start small. Let yourself feel, without guilt. Laugh, cry, love. In your own time, in your own way. Don't rush, don't force, just allow it. Her hand lingered over his, warm and steady, anchoring him in the present. And for the first time, Aarav realized that he could, maybe even should, allow his heart to open again. That evening he returned to his parents' house with a newfound clarity. He placed Mira's letter, her sketch, and Anaya's playful shadow sketched side by side, 3 pieces of his heart intertwined. Love lost, love remembered, and love beginning anew. He opened his sketchbook and began to draw, capturing the light and shadow of the riverbank, the warmth of shared laughter, the tender intimacy of a hand held in trust. Each line felt like a release, each stroke a reconciliation between grief and hope, between the past and the present. And as he paused, pencil hovering over the page, he whispered quietly into the stillness, I can love again and still carry you, Mira. I can be happy and still remember. My heart is big enough for both. The morning sun bathed the town in a golden glow, the streets alive with the gentle bustle of small-town life. Aarav walked beside Anaya, a quiet excitement thrumming in his chest. Today felt different, lighter, brighter, like the first tentative steps into something unfamiliar yet comforting. You're quiet, Anaya observed, glancing at him with a teasing smile. I'm thinking, he admitted, scratching the back of his neck, about how strange it feels to be here, like this, with you, and still feel okay. She laughed softly, a melodic sound that seemed to ripple through the crisp air. That's the beauty of it. You're allowed to feel okay, even if it's new, even if it feels risky. That's part of living. Aarav felt a warmth spread through him. She had a way of saying things that grounded him, that reminded life could still be gentle and kind. They walked to the little town market, a quaint cluster of stalls selling fresh fruits, flowers, and handmade crafts. Anaya picked out a small bunch of wildflowers, handing them to him with a sly smile. Here, for your desk. Your heart could use a little more color. Aarav chuckled, accepting the flowers. You think so? I know so, she replied, bumping his shoulder playfully. They wandered through the streets, stopping to taste sweet pastries from the bakery, laughing at their messy fingers. At the riverbank, they rented a small rowboat. Aarav's hands trembled slightly as he pushed the boat into the water, and Anaya reached for his, steadying him. You've got this, she said, smiling warmly. He laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound, feeling tension ease from his shoulders. The boat rocked gently on the water, ripples catching the sunlight like liquid gold. They rowed side by side,
talking about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, favorite books, silly what-if scenarios. For hours, the world beyond the river ceased to exist. As the sun began to dip low, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Anaya leaned back in the boat, resting her head against his shoulder. Aarav froze for a heartbeat, then felt a gentle warmth in his chest. He didn't pull away. Instead, he let himself relax, letting the moment sink in. "This feels right," he murmured. "It does. And it's okay to feel it, even if it's new, even if it feels scary." Aarav closed his eyes briefly, listening to the soft lapping of the river against the boat. For the first time in months, he felt truly present, fully alive. He realized that this shared laughter, gentle touches, quiet conversations, was the beginning of something real, something that honored the past, embraced the present, and hinted at a future. As they rowed back to the shore, Anaya brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, her fingers lingering a fraction longer than necessary. Aarav felt a spark, subtle, yet undeniable, and he smiled down at her. "You know, I don't know what comes next, but I think I want to find out. With you." She smiled, eyes bright. "Then let's," she said simply. And in that quiet moment, with the sun sinking low and the river shimmering around them, Aarav understood that he could love again. Slowly, tenderly, carefully. And that was enough. The morning was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers and wet earth from the riverbank. Aarav walked through the quiet streets of his hometown, sketchbook under his arm, feeling a gentle warmth spread through his chest. It was different from before. The tight, constricting grief that had once dominated his every thought. Now there was room for something else, something soft, something like hope. He found Anaya waiting at their favorite spot by the river, sketchbook balanced on her knees, sunlight catching her hair. "Morning," she said, her eyes bright. "Morning," Aarav replied, smiling genuinely, the first true, steady smile in weeks. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the river's gentle murmur. And for the first time, Aarav realized he was not just present, he was awake to life again. "I've been thinking," he said softly, his voice almost afraid to break the quiet. "About her, about Mira, and about us, about you." Anaya's hand found his, warm and grounding. "I'm listening," she said gently. I don't have to choose," he murmured. "I can love her memory and still care about you. And it feels okay." Anaya squeezed his hand. "It's more than okay," she said softly. "It's human. Grief and hope can coexist. Love lost and love found can exist side by side. That's the way life works." Aarav closed his eyes, letting her words sink in. He realized she was right. He had been holding himself hostage to guilt, to sorrow, to the fear of feeling again. But now he could see clearly. He could carry the past in his heart, honoring Mira. He could feel new light, new warmth with Anaya, and he could allow himself to be alive, fully, painfully, beautifully alive. They spent the day walking through the town, sharing small moments of joy, pointing out wildflowers along the paths, laughing at the clumsy antics of the town's stray cats, finding the perfect pastries at the bakery, and returning to the riverbank to sketch in silence, the soft sound of pencils on paper blending with the lapping water. Aarav noticed something remarkable. The heaviness in his chest had lessened. Not gone, it never would be, but it had shifted, transformed into a quiet strength, a gentle resilience. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold and pink, Aarav and Anaya sat on the dock, feet dangling over the edge, hands entwined. "Do you think I'll ever stop feeling her absence?" he asked softly. Anaya rested her head on his shoulder. "Maybe not," she said, "because the absence doesn't define you. It shapes you, yes, but it doesn't imprison you. You're allowed to feel joy, to love, to be here, now." Aarav closed his eyes, letting the warmth of her presence wash over him. For the first time in months, he felt at peace with himself. He thought of Mira, not with pain, but with gratitude, for her love, for her memory, for teaching him the depth of his own heart. And then he thought of Anaya, her laughter, her patience, her gentle courage, and he realized that love could be more than a single story. It could be layered, complex, and beautiful. That night, Aarav returned home, sketchbook in hand. He placed Mira's letter, her sketch, and Anaya's playful shadow drawing side by side, 3 threads of his heart intertwined. He opened his journal and began to write. "I am allowed to feel again. I am allowed to laugh, to hope, to love. And in all of this, I carry her and I carry myself. Life is fragile, and love is fragile, but maybe that's what makes it worth living. And maybe, just maybe, I am ready." For the first time in months, Aarav allowed himself to sleep that night with light in his chest, a quiet, steady glow of hope that promised life could be tender, grief could coexist with joy, and love could bloom once more. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber, rose, and gold. Aarav and Anaya sat on the familiar dock by the river, their hands intertwined, legs dangling over the edge. The gentle lapping of water mirrored the calm in Aarav's chest, a calm he hadn't felt in months. He thought of Mira, her memory, her love, her absence. It was all still there, woven into the fabric of his heart. But now it no longer held him captive. It coexisted with the warmth he felt sitting beside Anaya, with the laughter they shared, with the gentle thrill of new love. Anaya looked up at him, eyes soft and tender. "You're smiling," she said, teasing but gentle. Aarav's lips curved into a full, steady smile, the first in a while that felt completely real. "I am," he admitted. I think I'm finally ready to live again, fully, to honor the past and embrace the present." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "And I'm here," she whispered, every step of the way. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of months of grief lift just slightly. I love you, Anaya," he said softly, the words trembling at first, then gaining strength. She looked up, eyes glimmering with emotion. "I love you too, Aarav," she replied, "and that's exactly how it's supposed to be. Slow, patient, real." The river glimmered like liquid gold beneath the sinking sun, the world around them quiet, except for the rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. In that moment, Aarav realized something profound. Life was still fragile, grief still lingered, but love, gentle, patient, and tender,
was possible again. They sat together, holding hands, sharing warmth and quiet laughter, letting the sunset witness their hearts slowly stitching together. Mira's memory remained, a soft, guiding light, but it no longer cast shadows over his life. Instead, it had carved a space in his heart large enough to hold both love and remembrance, loss and joy, past and future. As darkness gently fell, Aarav whispered quietly, almost to himself, "Here's to new beginnings, and to carrying everything that matters, with love." Anaya squeezed his hand, smiling, "And to every tomorrow we'll face together," she said. They sat there in quiet contentment, watching the stars emerge one by one. And for the first time in a long while, Aarav felt whole. A new chapter of life was beginning, not in erasing the past, but in embracing it while stepping bravely into the light of love and hope.